Day one wrap up. That's a nice place to be, isn't it? Oh, look, it's questions. So here's some of the questions we didn't get to, and some new ones from you all. I'm going to start with the oldest ones. I'm like policing the mic, and I'm not even using it.
Use your mic.
One of the comments was thanks for using the mic, and now I have it 1.5 feet from my face. Okay, so accommodations are not paid for by tenants. Modifications can be required to be paid for by tenants. Absolutely correct.
Right.
If we didn't say that correctly or we implied otherwise, we didn't mean to. So that is right. We agree. Where is the data on the lack of affordable, accessible units? We will cover this tomorrow.
And it's in the market study of your consolidated plan. Karen just talked about the consolidated plan. I have just looked up 2 of the consolidated plans for this, for Detroit. I looked up Detroit. See me after the meeting. I've looked up Memphis, right? You can look up your consolidated plan, and they have a housing market analysis in that plan. You can use it against them. Ooh, did I say that out loud?
It's on tape.
What happened to funding for the California Community Transition Program? I don't know.
I don't know what.
Does anybody know?
Oh, Paul, I'm
Paula
sorry.
knows?
More than one thing, but the main thing is it was money follows the person and the funding ended.
No.
It's a pretty short answer. Okay. Okay. Next up. Will reasonable accommodations be addressed in a more comprehensive manner? I think that would be good. How to present a request, document it, file a complaint, etc. But not really in our materials. I don't know if
It's not in our materials. I think any of us, though, could sit down. If you're particularly interested, you could sit down and we can talk to you about it.
Yep.
One of the things, people always want a form. The truth is, a reasonable accommodation request can be verbal. There's no magic form, right? But we can talk more about that either on breaks or any of us can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there exceptions for older apartment complexes to have to comply with accessibility, or rather not have to comply with accessibility? Steps, no elevators, et cetera, especially ones that are subsidized. So no. I mean, there's no...
Nobody's grandfathered in.
Right. There's no grandfather clause in the ADA, so we
But
should be educating
everybody's
people about that.
grandfathered in if you have to spend money.
Yeah, right. Right.
I mean, don't we all know that?
Yeah.
Right? If you have to spend money, you're grandfathered in. Wrong.
She's being sarcastic.
Wrong.
I am. Wrong.
Wrong.
Well, I think it should be pointed out that the fair housing law mandates design and construction criteria for multifamily housing built after a certain date.
Right, that's true. That's
1991. So if it's pre-1991, which a lot of the housing stock, which a lot of the apartment housing stock is, they may not have even that basic accessibility that fair housing amendment required.
Right, but that would be then, my question is if that's a significant deterrent or barrier to accessing the housing stock that you have, then what is your community or jurisdiction doing about affirmatively furthering fair housing? What does that plan say? How are they using their federal money? Are they just sort of tolerating that? Or it's an opportunity, could be an opportunity for advocacy. If it's a big enough thorn in your side, you decide to go after it, there's probably ways to make the case and to push for renovations.
Yeah, that was actually my question. I'm in southwestern Minnesota. We have 10 apartment buildings that have income-based units, subsidized units.
Okay. 9
out of those 10, you can't physically get into the building. I mean, they're 1950s, 60s buildings. So it's a deterrent for anybody, elderly people. That takes up most of our income-based housing is not accessible to even get in and get the application. You have to have someone hold the door open for you. You get in there, it's a split level to even get to one of the floors. That's 9 out of 10. Our income-based family housing is like that. And there's a big deterrent there, and we don't know. Our con plan is a state plan out of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. We don't, out in rural Minnesota, we're not even taken into consideration. So what do we do? How do we bring them into compliance and make that housing available to the population that needs it?
Well, I mean, I would start by doing exactly what you've done, which is have the data to hand that you can demonstrate why this is a barrier, and you have identified allies already, people who are concerned about households that are elderly and other people who are going to need access to those units. So you've got a constituency of people that you can pull together. So partnerships. The advocacy then is that they're using public dollars in a way that is not addressing the need. So in the con plans that I just looked up in the Detroit Consolidated Plan, they do this really nice market study that shows all of these things that are wrong with the market, that cost burden is the number one problem. Okay, their priorities are economic development, public services, public improvements, public facilities, homelessness prevention. Number 6 is rental assistance. So they don't even address what they identify as their top priority until number 6 on their list. There's your disconnect right there. So I would look for things like that you're governed by the state plan, so it's a little more of an uphill battle. But, and part of what you have to do is do an assessment. Like I just said to this lady, if it's a big enough thorn in your side, if it's a significant barrier, go all out and fight it. If it's not, then maybe put that on the burner for next year, right? So you have to, and only you guys can make those decisions for yourselves. There's lots of things out there that you could spend time addressing. You have to, I would look for feasibility. I mean, I would borrow from these 2 playbooks. It's not low-hanging fruit because none of this is easy. But the 212 new mainstream vouchers, that didn't just happen. That was determined, multi-year determined advocacy that made that happen.
Terry, I would also add, because you have your Center for Independent Living Association, use the association of your 8 centers in Minnesota and help that body, that collaboration to work with the legislature, not the legislature, but the folks that are doing the con plan and get together, because Marshall is a small dot in the state, but it's a part of a bigger picture with a bigger issue. And so I would say, in joining with the other 7 centers, you're going to have strength in numbers when you go to advocate for changes in that con plan. Does that make sense, Terry? Yeah.
Okay, great. Somebody pointed out that the Olmsted date, we said February, it's June 22nd. That's right. So sorry about that, 1999.
Yeah.
And somebody else, like I mentioned, said thanks for using the mics. This is an access issue, right? We talked about that. So I really appreciate you guys cooperating with that. I know it's frustrating when you're like ready to talk and you got to wait for me to run across the room, but thanks. And along the same lines, I mean, you guys have just been a great audience. We do these a lot, and how engaged you all have been right from the beginning has been really, really exciting, and I trust that's going to continue over the next few days, so that's been really cool to see. A fresh question, how are mainstream vouchers different from other vouchers?
So as I tried to mention, there's 4 qualifiers. One is, are they homeless? Is there a threat to homelessness? Are they in a nursing home, or a threat to go into a nursing home and being someone with a disability? So those were the 4 with the mainstreams. So it's same type of programming, it's just a different pot of money.
Right. I would say, I mean, one of my failures this year on a personal advocacy level or on a local community advocacy level is I tried to get our housing authority to apply for those mainstream vouchers, and they refused to do it. And I'm on their board, so it was not fun. But what you're asking, and this may be not your question, but I'm going to answer it anyway, which is when we talked about housing choice vouchers that the Public Housing Authority administers, right, the Section 8, that's one way to do rental assistance. There are also other rental assistance that housing authorities can apply for. So one of those is mainstream vouchers, and those came up last year, and they're coming up again. They have made a huge allocation to mainstream vouchers at the federal level, enormous. They haven't even come close to spending it. It's going to come up again. So if you want vouchers targeted for people with households with disabilities, mainstream vouchers are the way to go. Another example of the kind of vouchers that housing authorities can do is VASH, Veterans Administration, Veterans Specialty Supportive Housing Vouchers. There's lots of them. And so part of, again, if you have a housing authority that is the least bit friendly, or if you're in an area like Darrel is, where he's got multiple housing authorities, and I know him, he's played one against the other. I know he has. Who, me? If housing authorities are something that you want to attack and that you consider to be a feasible target, there are many, many, many things that housing authorities can do that they may not want to do, like run multiple waiting lists, like apply for these discretionary vouchers, which then they're going to have to turn around and administer, and they're going to say they don't have enough money and they don't have enough capacity, and right? You can make it happen.
Yeah, and with that too, with the mainstream vouchers, I know that I'm co-chair of the Nickel Housing Subcommittee. We've heard time and again where senators said that they were written into successful applications for mainstream vouchers, but when it came time for implementation, they were snuffed out and left in the cold, not a part of the equation. Then I would just say, friendly little reminder over here, we helped you get those vouchers. We were written in as a partner, so don't forget us. But I know that that's been kind of a problem that we've heard, that people were just kind of left out of the cold, even though they were helping getting those awarded.
I would say very sweetly, gosh, you wouldn't really want HUD to find out about that, would you?
Yeah. So we've got time. What other questions do you all have before we break today?
I just wanted to let you know that Indiana does have a state housing authority.
Oh, they do now, okay.
It's the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. So just to clear that up.
Thank you for the update.
We aren't that far out.
No, thanks for the update.
Oh,
Yes.
Mike, Chris.
Yeah. So it's going to be hard to kind of get specific with this question, but I'm kind of curious. I would imagine many folks here work with folks that have that kind of invisible disability that, say, the mental health disabilities,
Right.
say panic disorders, sometimes those come later in life. Sometimes people have them inherently. Advocacy, I mean, just a kind of a case example, and I have a feeling I'm going to start seeing more of these in my community. Individual, just because his disability made him annoying to, say, an apartment, leasing, the leasing office manager or something. This is a case where the individual is actually thrown out, and the housing authority actually didn't advocate for him to stay. It was a bunch of, legal mumbo jumbo he didn't understand. They said sign the paper. Even if he would have read the paper, he probably wouldn't have understood it. So he's, he was forced to move out of there. He had 4 months. It was an extension the lawyer advocated it on, and I don't know how much the housing authority had to do with that. But
yeah, I think people think that the community thinks that folks with hidden disabilities are not valid, or they're not legitimate disabilities, whatever. because it's not like someone using a wheelchair or whatever. But I think there again, it comes back to education, and annoying behavior is okay, but if it's disruptive behavior, that may be something else.
Yeah.
And a lot of times property owners have been advised by legal and others that if you're consistent in your enforcement of your rules and regs, then you're erring on the right side of the equation. So I think that's, one thing to take a look at, that annoying behavior of whatever, is it really, out of the ordinary, where there's a direct threat to self or others in the complex.
Yeah. So that's, I was thinking, it's not an instance where he's running around naked in the community or.
That's just annoying if you have a bad body.
Yeah, that's right. Calling the office with concerns of asbestos. Just leaving voicemails essentially. I mean.
Yeah.
That's nonsense.
That is.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah. I mean, I think back to the question about reasonable accommodation, part of what goes on with reasonable accommodation is that one of the reasons that a landlord can evict is direct threat, like you guys were just talking about. Well, but just because the landlord perceives something as a threat doesn't actually make it a threat. And then even if someone is disruptive, as Darrel said, running around naked or whatever, knocking on people's doors and requesting, money, that kind of thing, even you can request a reasonable accommodation to the rules for that behavior, and then the person can't be evicted until the accommodation is granted and it fails. You see what I'm saying? I mean, the person needs to have support to change that behavior. They can't stay and be disruptive forever. But even for that sort of extreme case, there's a way to use reasonable accommodation to buy the person some time, to maybe bring some services and supports in and do some wraparound and do some self-advocacy training and planning, and and if that fails, then it fails. But there are things to do.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we've all seen where there's that threat of retaliation. So if if a resident is doing some crazy stuff, then there's retaliation by management, and you really need to be mindful. And what I do is listen to both sides of the story, and that's like if your Fair Housing Center or your other advocates are involved with you, check both sides of the story. But we've seen a lot of times where people have been afraid and cower to landlords because they're afraid of retaliation.
Can you be more specific about how one goes about requesting these different types of vouchers that you referred to? You were talking about mainstream vouchers and veterans vouchers. I don't know what the process is for doing that. Would you be addressing that at some point?
Go ahead, Ann.
No, go you first.
Well, the mainstream vouchers have to be applied for from the housing authority.
Yeah.
Right.
They are the entity that provides the application for the mainstream vouchers. Now, if they're smart and want to strengthen their application, they will ask for community partners to be in on their app so that they can strengthen that. And so our center had been asked by 5 of the 11 to go in on those applications, that application as a partner.
So then, okay, let me just add. So
Please.
then the advocacy is not going to HUD and trying to get more of that, although that's always helpful, but going to your housing authority and talk them into applying, like Darrel did.
Yep.
So what you want to look for is what's called a NOFA.
Yeah.
It's the Notice of Funding Availability that's put out by HUD. And then HUD, when they put out this NOFA, they will describe what that funding is to be used for, whether it's VASH or whether it's mainstream or whether it's whatever of the many programs they offer. So you can, if you have nothing better that you like to do with your time, sign up for getting notices when those NOFAs are released. And when you get a NOFA and you find out, oh, this is a NOFA that my housing authority can apply for, I'd be knocking on the housing authority's door going, ooh, look, we saw that HUD has this funding and we need these vouchers and we're here to help you apply for these. So sign up for the most wonderful reading you will ever have in your lifetime. You will be inundated with information from HUD, but sometimes it can be very helpful.
Well, the other thing, the other thing is, you may already have somebody in your community. There might be a low-income affordable housing coalition that's already tracking some of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So make friends with them. You don't have to do it all yourself.
Well, this is a follow-up to that, and these vouchers are funded from a national pool of money, right? And so
Right.
is there just money sitting on the table that nobody's applying for? Or are you, when you respond to a NOFA in your community, are you just competing with some other community for a dwindling pool of resources that's harder and harder to get your hands on? Is that what's happening?
It's a national pool of money that you're applying for.
Yes, you're competing.
Is money lying on the table, or is
It's
it being
sitting-
used somewhere?
I mean, it's not lying, nothing's lying on the table, but the federal government made an allocation of what I heard was, now Darrel may know better than me because he's on the Nickel Housing Committee, but it was $100 million of money that was going to go into mainstream vouchers. Well, they only released a fraction of that in this first round, so there's going to be other rounds. So this is what I think HUD would call it discretionary. So they put it out when they feel the urge to put it out. Okay, so whatever, it doesn't matter. The other money that Karen was talking about, that when we're talking about the consolidated plan, those are annual allocations. Those are formula allocations, so they come no matter what. And then your public housing authority gets an annual. They have to submit an application for it, but it's really not competitive unless they have murdered a puppy in, broad daylight and it got on the paper. They're pretty much going to get what they apply for in their standard, if they run housing units or if they have a Section 8 program. Unless there's a national cut, they're going to get what they got before.
So Darrel, when you say your center got 212 vouchers, are these discretionary vouchers? So you're saying, and you're saying that we advocate for them, we can't apply for them. How did you end up getting those for your center?
Yeah, so we, Ability 360 did not get all 212. Between the 5 housing authorities that applied, we have been allocated some of the 212. So, for example, Maricopa County, which is the county with Phoenix, they designated out of their total allotment, which I think 45, I want to say, 10 of those were allocated to us out of their 45, I'll say. And city of Tempe, I think they might have gotten 55. And of that 55 that the Tempe Housing Authority received, they're allocating 18 of them to our center. So they're the ones that administer it, but they use us as a partner to help with the applications and help to fill those units quicker. Because, I mean, they flat out told us, Tempe told us, they didn't need any community partner to identify, 55 people. They could have plucked those off their waiting list, in a snap of a finger. That would have been the easy way. But to strengthen their app, they got partners in. And so with that, we are helping them fill out the apps, get the people for 18 of their 55. Does that clarify?
So
Okay, yeah.
I'm thinking it might work the same way as it did when our housing authority applied for vouchers, specifically for us. After the vouchers were awarded, the only referrals that they would take for those vouchers were referrals that came from our SIL. And so we had 25 vouchers basically sitting there specifically for people with disabilities. People would come to us, we would refer them to the housing authority, letting the housing authority know this referral is coming from the Blue Ridge Independent Living Center. And as long as that individual met the eligibility requirements, they got a Section 8 voucher.
Yep.
So that's the way that it's worked.
And the other thing that I know that we're going to run into some tough times with is once a voucher is actually awarded to a consumer, I believe it's 90 days. 120. Okay, thank you. 120 days to find a unit to take that voucher to, and that's going to be a challenge. I told my staff, getting the voucher, filling out the application, getting it awarded, that's the easy part. And they're saying, that was easy? I said, no. Now that they have the voucher, you have 120 days to help them find a place. That's when the real work begins. Question over, and then in the back, yeah.
What would cause a public housing authority to be hesitant to apply for these vouchers?
It's extra work.
It's extra work.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would say that a friendly housing authority is worth its weight in gold. But they can only be pushed so far. The truth is that the Housing Choice Voucher Program, from the housing authority perspective, loses money every year. They're not making that up. That's the truth. And so they're reluctant to take on more vouchers because they're not making any money on it. They're not even breaking even on it. And so the administration of those vouchers is genuinely a burden. That's part of it. But you know, you can advocate with city or county or whoever to help the housing authority be a better player by helping to fund some of the administrative costs related to applying for these different voucher programs. I mean, you can ask, you know, if that's really the barrier, again, it comes down to an analysis. If that's really the only barrier, let's figure out how to get around that one.
Hi, Lisa Bonnie over here. I just want to give a shout out to Nickel because they sent an advisory out that NOFA was coming out. And because of that, I wasn't in that select circle. I hadn't been tracking that. I picked up the phone and I called our housing authority. It's not a sweet story because they weren't interested, but it started a conversation, and they did not want to apply because they said they didn't have time. So that kind of answers your question. But it did start a conversation in our office, and we did get a small grant from our SILC to kind of study the situation, and actually they're paying for us to be here. I kind of wish that we'd had this training at the beginning of that grant instead of at the end, but you know, it is what it is. So it's exciting to hear that there's more, because I feel like if we do the research that you all are suggesting, I could go back to the housing authority again and show that we're a little bit more knowledgeable and could possibly be a better partner. So thank you very much to all the Nickel folks that work so hard and all of you who are teaching us.
Thanks, Lisa.
Other questions? How are folks feeling? Is this working? Yes. Yeah? Okay. So, I mean, you know, we're going to get even more specific over the next couple of days. We're going to, like I said, we're going to spend a lot of time on funding, on partnerships. So we're going to drill down on some of these things that we've introduced today. So I know that can be kind of hard when we're still sort of at the top here or at the bottom. I don't know, whatever the analogy is. But again,
let me just say.
Oh yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
Darrel.
I just want to, from my part again, just to say, this is hard work. This is an intense day. This is going to be a very intense week. And that's because housing is not an easy solution.
Right.
If it was easy, if there was an easy fix, we all would be home right now.
Right.
So I really hope and really ask you all, stay with it, stay engaged, because you need to be the solution to your community. It's not easy, but do the work, it'll pay off.
Great. Thanks, Darrel. You know, I want to mention too, we've talked about, we talked about the project. Darrel talked this morning about the partnership that is ISLEnet, right? These 4 different organizations and entities running this very large project, putting together all these different resources on training and technical assistance. And one of the things that I always try to plug at our trainings is just how much information we have. So especially for those of you all that are new and those of you all that are wondering about these more peripheral things to housing work, we probably have a training on it.
Yeah.
Or a booklet, or an online course, or a mentoring program, or a webinar. And everything we do, like the camera in the back, everything we do is recorded and saved and put on our website. So I hope that, and like I said, Paul is the TA coordinator for ISLEnet, but all of us do TA work. So I hope as we go through this work, if there are those things, like the reasonable accommodation question, right? If there are those things that are peripheral to this work that you're struggling with, let us know. Because if we cannot point you to a specific resource, we will find an answer for you if we don't know it ourselves. I mean, I want you all to hear that and to know that we intend for that to kind of complement the more specific stuff we're talking about this week. Like, I talked about some of the resources we had on housing as part of the series, and Anne's at the back at lunch talking about an online course that's coming up.
Right.
What, in September?
In September,
I
yeah.
didn't even think about that.
Right.
Right, so especially for some of you all that are more at the beginner level, that's a perfect place for you all to start. Well, you're not starting, you're here, but to get some more information.
Staff, maybe staff that are
Right.
that are doing the direct contact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want you all to know that that's available too. That's a big part of what we do, and we want to help you all with that stuff. So, well, look, again, thanks so much for being so engaged today.